In this video, we're going to take a look at Farcaster frames and how you can develop your own frames locally on your machine using Next.js. Well, first, what are frames? Frames are little interactive apps, if you will, and they're kind of built into Warpcast and Farcaster. Farcaster is a lower level, like a social media platform, and Warpcast is kind of like a Twitter social media application built on top of Farcaster. So this is what Warpcast looks like. You can see that it looks a lot like Twitter. You can kind of tweet or cast little messages. But what's interesting is the team behind it, they've developed a thing called a frame. And this is what a frame looks like. It's kind of like an image, and then you can have little buttons on it like this. So you can have a gallery. You can also join little organizations or newsletters. You can follow people through the frames, and you can even play little games. So this is like a flag game right here. If you start the game, it'll say who has the flag, and you can yoink the flag from them. And then I'm going to yoink the flag, and then now says I have the flag, and I hold it for a certain amount of times. So this is all built using a Farcaster frame. So you can do a lot with these frames, but let's actually take a look at what they really are. And before we look into the frame code, we're going to explore what an open graph image is first, because frames are very much like open graph images. Now, if you take any link for any website and you paste it into a chat or anywhere, it's going to give you the title, the description, and it's going to give you this little image. This image is called an open graph image, or OG image. It's like a protocol developed by Facebook back in the day, and you can specify on your website that whenever someone pastes a link, you want this image to show up. Now what a frame is, it's basically taking these metadata tags and they're adding new metadata tags to it. So you can have like a little interactive open graph image. So as you can see, it looks very similar, right? This is actually an image right here. And you can add little buttons to it and little interactive bits to your open graph image. So let's look at an example of a frame. It starts with like an open graph image, and then you can add a Farcaster frame button to it. And once you click on that button, it hits a backend, and the backend can kind of live anywhere you want it to live. And the backend will redirect you to another frame or another open graph image and another set of Farcaster frame buttons and so forth. And you can kind of chain and link all these frames together to make a little application. So if you click on the foo button, it'll go to this frame. If you click on bar, it'll give you this one right here. And let's take a look at what the initial frame is. All a frame is just some metadata tags. That's it. So we can take a look at an example in the code. So I'm going to open up the repo. So for this example, I've built it in Next.js, but the first frame, you can kind of just use a straight up HTML file. It doesn't need to be anything special. So this is all that is required for an initial frame. You have the HTML tag, you need a title tag, you need a initial metadata tag for the OG image right here. So this is the image that shows up in your Slack. So this is that image that shows up there. Now these are where the new Farcaster metadata tags come up from. You'll need a meta tag for FC frame, and then you'll need one for the image, and then you can do cool things like add a button. And when you click on that button, it goes and hits an endpoint. This endpoint right here actually lives within my Next.js application under the APIs. So it's going to hit the endpoint, it's going to hit a server, but this can be whatever server you want. Remember, you can have it anywhere else. All you need to do is respond with another frame. And we can kind of test this out. So if we go to the website, so I've deployed that basic HTML file. That's this file right here, right? As you can tell, it's very basic, but that is all you need for the initial frame. Warpcast has a little frame validator, which is actually really nice. You can paste in the page, and then when you load it, this is what the frame looks like, and it'll tell you all the check marks that you have on all the required metadata tags. And I've added a button, so when I click the button, it's going to go and hit my endpoint under my API folder, and it's going to return another frame. When in this case, it's just like another image, and then the button changes. And I can click on next page again. It's going to hit that endpoint again, come back, going to return a different image. Going to hit that endpoint again, come back, going to come back with a different image. At the end of the slide, you can have a button that redirects you to a different page. In this case, I'm going to redirect to the GitHub repo, or you can do a restart and it restarts that little image slider. So let's take a look in the code on how we did that. So this is the initial frame as we've seen. Right now it's like a index.html file, and I've put it under the public folder because in Next.js, anything in the public folder is like a static file. So this can be completely static. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. What you can also do is, since you're working with Next.js anyways, you can make a basic folder. I'm using the new Next.js app router for this example. So you make a folder called basic and you put the page.tsx in there. And this is what it looks like if you Next.jsify that HTML file. It's the same thing. You just have a metadata tag up here. This is that open graph image. And under the other object here, this is where you put those frame meta tags. And the body is basically very simple, but this is what you needed to do to translate this HTML file into a Next.js page. What's important is this post URL. It still needs to go to API/basic. So if we go into API/basic, there's a route in here, and this is sort of the back end for our little application. What happens when you click the button, it's going to do a post request to this endpoint, which is right here. In the post request, we're going to see what ID is being sent along. For the initial frame, we're going to send the ID of 1. And it's going to take that ID of 1 from the search params, and it's going to add a number to it, and it's going to return basically just some simple HTML as well. You get the HTML tags, you get the title tag, you get the metadata tags, you get this pretty much the same frame information, but we just changed the image right here. So the frame image changes to park-id, and this ID is just being incremented every time we click the button. And when it reaches the last slide, or the last ID, which is number 4, it's going to give us a few different buttons. It's going to give us one button here, and you can have 2 buttons. So for a frame, you can have up to 4 buttons, and they can all kind of do different things. This one is going to be a link out to the GitHub repo, and this one is going to start over the little slideshow thing. So this is like a very basic example of how to get a frame working. Now let's take a look at a more advanced example. So under the advanced page, we have another page here. We're using something from Coinbase called the onchainkit, and it's going to give you some little helpers to make your meta tags. So this get frame metadata, you can put your buttons in here. You can specify the image. It's going to help you cut down on the code that you have to write. But the important part is this post URL is going to hit a new endpoint called API/advanced. And it's another different API that lives in the advanced folder. So in this example, we're going to enter in an email. So let's actually take a look at what it looks like. So if we do advanced, this is already live. I'm going to reload it. So this is the initial slide, and this is what it's going to do. You can kind of enter in your email. Now, I'm not really sure if this is a legit use of a frame, but it's something you could theoretically do. You can show them an input. The user can input an email, and the nice part is it's going to show up right on their feed. So you don't have to go to another website to enter an email or to gather interactions from the user. It happens right here in your feed, right? You can like mint an NFT if you wanted to. You can get their engagement right then and there. There's no redirecting to anywhere else. So let's pretend that this is a good idea and that you can enter your email. So what happens if you enter a bad email and you hit sign up? Well, it's going to hit that endpoint, and it's going to say a valid email is required. And since we're using Next.js, we can kind of generate these little OG images, because Next.js on/cell, they have a little image generation helper called image response. So let's take a look at the advanced API and see what's happening here. It's going to be the post request still. We can get the input text off of this body. Now in Farcaster, there's untrusted data and there's trusted data, because down in the weeds of Farcaster, it's built on top of Ethereum. So there's crypto involved, and there's cryptographic signatures, And what you actually want to do is get trusted data from the body, but that requires you to run like a hub and all this other stuff that kind of is out of the scope for this example. The right way to do it is to use the trusted data to get this information. Since this is just a basic example, I'm going to use the untrusted data and I'm going to get the input text from it. So this is that text box we fill in. And here's where we do some simple regex to see if it's a valid email. And if it's a valid email, then we go on. If it's not a valid email, we're going to say valid email required. And what that is going to do, that's going to hit this other route under OG. And this code is basically copied from Next.js, and it's kind of how you can on the fly generate these OG images. So on the fly, I can take in this title text and generate an OG image on Vercel, and it's going to give me this valid email required. And if I type in a valid email, so test@email.com, we try again, it's going to say sign up successful, and it just prints out your email. You can kind of make it do whatever you want. And if it's successful, I'll say sign up successful, and I'll put in their email address here. It's going to hit the OG image generation, and it's going to return with this image here. And that's all there is to this little frame. This Warpcast frame validator, it only works on sites that have been published, so it needs to be a live site. But what if you want to tinker around with a frame that you're working on locally? Well, you can do that pretty easily as well. I'm going to show you how right now. This is my Next.js folder, and we're going to do a npm run dev on it. It's going to open up the Next.js app on localhost 3000. Alright, so now this is running locally on my machine, but if I try to put this URL into this validator, it's not going to work because I'm on localhost. And if I go to, let's say, the basic, this is the basic frame with the HTML tags in it, and you can kind of take a look at the tags by viewing the page source. And if you look for like the OG image, here's where those meta tags are at. And you can see here are the Farcaster frame tags right here. Alright, so how can we test this locally? We're going to need to clone a repo called onchainkit, and I've already done that. Onchainkit right here. This is the repo you're going to need to clone down locally, and you're going to be using what's called frame gear. So once you have cloned down onchainkit, you want to cd into frame gear. You'll do an npm install, which I've already done. And then you do an npm run dev inside of the frame gear folder, and it's going to spin up like another little Next.js local server, but this time it'll be localhost 1337. Alright, so this is frame gear. It's very much similar to this validator, but you can use your local host on here. So if I copy this and paste it into the frame gear and hit fetch, you can see that it does the same thing. Let me hide myself real quick. You can see all the meta tags that are being available, and you want them to be all green. Then when you go through the different endpoints, it'll tell you which image is being used and what the button is and what the endpoint is associated with that button. So if we want to do the advanced example, and let's say we want to change something, right? Let's say we want to change this button from sign up to something else. We're going to go to the metadata for the advanced example, and you can say sign up now and add a few more exclamation points. And then if you go back here, you just have to do fetch again, and you see real time, you get a little cool local environment to test all these out on. And you can even test out those APIs that you work on. So if you want to change the text on there, you can say invalid email, for example. Right? It's going to hit this local route. It's going to generate that OG image, and you can see what happens. So we're going to do fetch again and put in a bad email. You can say now that that message has changed to invalid email. And this is how you locally develop your little frames. And since it's all based on a social network, you can do things like do giveaways or something, right? You can make a frame that says, if you are a follower of mine, I can give you something special. If you want to enter this giveaway, follow me, and then you can check, because it's kind of on a decentralized network where everybody can access that data. You can check, are they actually a follower of mine? If they are, enter them into your special contest or whatever. If you would like to join Warpcast and check all this out, I'll leave a little link in the description so you can sign up. If this video was helpful to you, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.